Hello and welcome back to Mark's NOTCAST. If you're a regular viewer, you'll know my name is Mark. This is not a podcast. And I'm a middle-aged man talking about records he owns, likes, loves, or is merely aware of, depending on what the contents are. Today's number 469. Good God, that's a big number. And it's the 24th of November, 2025. 10 years ago tonight, I was in Dublin at I think it was 3 Arena, watching the last of my 10 shows on U2's Innocence and Experience tour, my favourite U2 tour, that ended with a 17-minute version of Bad and 40 as a medley. My God, that was an incredible show. When I was a kid, the idea of ever seeing U2 ever was pretty exciting. The idea of going to see them in Dublin was just off the scale in terms of, living my dreams. Now that sounds pretty odd when you think about it, but we've got to have a dream to make a dream come true, as the end credits of 1981's terrible film Cannonball Run tell us. And when I was recording on my dad's stereo, New Year's Eve 1989, as a 16-year-old recording U2 at Dublin's The Point onto a C90 and a C60, I came to the conclusion that the only place in the world I wanted to be was in that room in Dublin. Of course I wasn't. I was in my parents' house in Birmingham, England, home of heavy metal. And I managed to get to achieve a sort of a dream later on. And of course, sometimes I kind of thought, is liking music a phase? Is it a thing I'm going to grow out of? And it's important to think about, the relationship that we have with the music that we love and the artists that we love, or we used to love, or now aware of, or don't listen to anymore. And that sounds pretty harsh, really. But today I am talking about an artist who used to mean a lot more to me then than he does now. His name is Morrissey, and we're talking about his 7th studio LP as a solo artist, You Are The Quarry, released in 2004. And in terms of primary references, by the way, I would regard Morrissey's autobiography, published about 10 years ago, 2013, as a primary source for this, a main kind of attraction through which I've put a fair chunk of information. But what I will say is with any artist that you know over a period of time whose music that you like or love or have a relationship with, you end up kind of thinking, I have a degree of trust with that artist. I have a degree of investment with that artist. I'm going to be buying the records unheard. I'm going to be going to the gigs without knowing what they're going to be like. I'm going to put my faith in the moment. I'm going to trust on the basis of the past activity that they will not fail to meet our expectations. And then I'm reminded of a sign that I saw in a protest in America that said, our expectations for you were low, but holy fuck. And I certainly have had some less than amazing experiences buying records and then being quite disappointed with them, because in any situation I hope for the other party in it, be it an artist, a person, a cat, to bring their best to that particular moment, and to be playing with a full deck, and to be really fully engaged, because we only get this moment, this here and this now, this once, and we should be as good as we can be. And it's fair to say that for me at least, You Are The Quarry was the start of the period where I thought maybe my relationship with Morrissey was changing into something a little different. I'm sure some of you who ride or die with him and still think Kill Uncle is a work of deathless genius will no doubt be saying heresy and putting pins into a voodoo doll of me as we speak. It's not worth it. For me, You Are The Quarry was a good record, but it was the one where the cracks started to show. And I'm always reminded of a phrase that I read actually in Bruce Dickinson's autobiography, of all things, where he was talking about the Pope. And he said, well, of course the Pope can never be wrong because he's the Pope. And at one point in his career, in fact, in the album Live at Earls Court, released recorded in 2004 and released in 2005, Morrissey says, quite simply, I can't be wrong about everything, I just can't be. And that's the kind of fallacious thinking that gets you into a situation where perhaps you can be surrounded by yes men, where you're not listening to alternate points of view, and then you end up with a thing where actually what we see is the most undiluted form of the artist. And sometimes that undiluted form features, well, the good and the bad. And then you end up in a situation like George Lucas in The Phantom Menace, where nobody took him to one side and went, mate, these Nemoidians, right? You need to work on their accent because their accent sounds suspiciously like racist stereotypes. Jar Jar Binks talks like a racist stereotype. You need to buck your ideas up. This is good. You can write this shit, George. You can't make me say it. And every great artist needs somebody that pushes back against them, which is a strange situation to be in if you're a solo artist. That's your name on it, and you have to trust your vision, and sometimes your vision can let you down. We start the Are The Quarry period with Morrissey in the wilderness. He had no record label for the first time since 1982. He had left the UK and moved to West Hollywood, to 1498 North Sweetser Avenue, apparently, according to his autobiography. His next door neighbour was Johnny Depp. And Morrissey's career options had changed from being an artist that made records to an artist that could tour, and had been offered slots on EastEnders and Emmerdale. It was a strange period of time for a Morrissey fan. Allegedly, he was asked by a label if he would be willing to ditch his band and work with Radiohead instead, to which point, in a moment of royalty, he said no, he wouldn't. His band are his band, and he would stick with them, and he would be loyal to them. But as we've seen over time with the many, many lineups of his band, that hasn't always been the case. And in 1999 to 2000, as a placeholder to generate some money after that very, very expensive court case with Mike Joyce, who very recently published his autobiography, The Drums, but to which the court case is reduced to a mere footnote on page 192. And that means the three living members of the Smiths have all written autobiographies, of course. But following that, and apparently a lien that had been placed on his assets by Joyce because of Morrissey's failure to pay, he had to generate money the only way he knew how. And without a recording contract, that meant touring with no new material, operating effectively as a labourer, touring the world and playing songs. And 1999 to 2000 saw something like 48 shows across Europe, America, Mexico, and of course South America, for which I think was his first visit for the first time, with Spike Smith, formerly of The Damned, on the Oi Esteban tour. And then in 2002, after a thoroughly successful 2001 where Morrissey did nothing, he changed drummers. Dean Butterworth, who I think used to be in Good Charlotte, but I could be wrong, came to the band and then toured again, playing the Royal Albert Hall, but this time as a returning hero in the wilderness, and as opposed to what he had been regarded as 3 years previously, which was a has-been. And yeah, I don't want to sound too harsh about him. A lot of acts that became famous in about 1982 to 1986, particularly acts like, The Cure, Depeche Mode, New Order, REM, although REM were touring, they were all struggling with what happens when your fan base ages out. So if you were a Morrissey fan or a Smiths fan in 1983 and you were 16, suddenly by 1999 you were 32, and you'd probably, your life had changed. The things that perhaps you listened to Morrissey for were things that weren't necessarily part of your life anymore. You weren't thinking about going to a club and standing on your own and going home and wanting to cry and wanting to die. You were thinking about, okay, so I've got a job and I've got a mortgage, and how's the pension looking? And maybe I should get a better car, and I'm just about to become a dad, or I've got married. These are different sets of concerns to the ones that you might have had when you were 16, when you were 16, clumsy and shy, and you went to London and you booked yourself into the YWCA, for example. These are the kind of dilemmas which were faced by other artists. The Cure, of course, had their infamous World Mood Swings period. Depeche Mode had released Ultra, which they didn't tour, and then went into a greatest hits tour. New Order didn't exist. These were the kind of problems that bands that had been once contemporaries had now become. They were struggling with working out, well, who am I? What am I going to be now an adult? And if the lyrics and the music were particularly attached to a kind of questioning, uncertain, somewhat adolescent personality traits, and I know that a lot of Morrissey was so deeply, deeply loved by so many, many people, because he talked about, foibles and insecurities, and it bordered almost into self-obsession. I think at one point you ended up kind of going, you either repeat yourself endlessly and you become like the AC/DC of indie mope rock, or you evolve, you change, you move on, you do the next thing. You start to talk about the problems that you've got. Sadly, for Morrissey, the problems that he did have were the fact that he had lost a court case, and he was due to pay a 7-figure sum to Mike Joyce. And then you end up writing songs about people with smelly uniforms, about senile judges, about northern leeches that keep on removing. And as a 20-something fan of Morrissey, I found it difficult to listen to someone complain about merely being very rich as opposed to being super rich because they'd lost a court case because they hadn't paid somebody an adequate and fair amount of money. And obviously in Autobiography, Morrissey spends, I think, 53 pages talking about the court case, and Mike Joyce spends probably 53 words talking about it. And there's this discussion around how public do you have to be about your disputes? How obvious do you have to be about what's happening? And sometimes nobody needs to know. I don't want to know necessarily. Occasionally you do have to be open and honest about things and just go, look, bad juju's going on. But then other times you're going to go, does anybody really need to know all of the drama? Probably not. And talking of drama, those of you who know me in the real world will know that there has been some drama in my personal life in the past 12 months. And I'm not going to be addressing that for some period of time, if ever, in fact, because it doesn't need to be anybody else's business. So with that in mind, after the 2002 tour, Morrissey played a radio session for Janice Long on, I think, the 17th of November 2002, premiered some new songs, including I Like You and I think maybe First of the Gang to Die and Irish Blood, English Heart. And you could only really listen to those if you downloaded, the unauthorised recordings of the radio broadcasts. 2002 was also followed up with a documentary that was broadcast on Channel 4 called The Importance of Being Morrissey, a fascinating 45 minutes insight into his life. And it portrayed him as actually generally, a flawed but interesting human, but not entirely successfully. There were moments where I kind of thought, I wondered when I was watching it exactly about, how mature is Morrissey? How able is he to deal with conflict? How able is he to deal with difficult conversations? That type of thing. And all of that was just the preamble that went up to 2004, when the first single from his 7th solo LP, You Are The Quarry, was released. Tempted by the fact that Morrissey could cultivate and relaunch a boutique label, an old record label that somebody owned the rights to, Morrissey was given the opportunity to release material on Attack Records, which apparently was formerly a reggae label in the 60s that had become dormant, and released his first single in 7 years, Irish Blood, English Heart. And it's a fabulous song. It's one of his absolute best songs ever, undoubtedly so. It is probably it's unambiguously political, but it's also ambiguously political in so much as whilst it's possibly the best distillation of the moral essence of Morrissey in 2004, it's also a little sly in terms of what it says and what it does about where England is sick to death of Labour and the Tories and of Oliver Cromwell. And it's a bizarre one because, as has been said, Morrissey's ability to place a melody and to sing a vocal melody is not always straightforward. So, for example, if you're a conventional songwriter and you write a song, and by the way, Irish Blood, English Heart was originally a song by a band called Johnny Panic and the Bible of Dreams, which Alan White, I think, was a member of. And it was also known as Not Bitter, but Bored. And the song itself was turned into, effectively described as a riposte to the NME, who in 1992 did that damaging front cover about Morrissey and nationalism. Nowadays, everyone will be going, well, no big deal, someone wrapping themselves in a flag. Then it was a very, very different world. And so for Irish Blood, English Heart, for example, you will have a lyric where he sings, you know, there is no one on earth I'm afraid of, and no regime can buy or sell me. And I've been dreaming of a time when to be English is not to be baneful, or to be standing by the flag, not feeling shameful, racist or partial, which looked at from the remove of 21 years. And now that we're in an environment where, and let's be blunt about it, people are putting up flags on street corners with the aim of intimidating anybody that isn't white, male, pale, stale and boring, and straight, of course. They're putting up flags on street corners to suggest to anybody that isn't, you know, a boring, white, straight, tedious kind of, anyone that was different in any way from the stereotype of what good English people used to be when England was a proper country and you could walk down your street without having halal meat shot at you by, you know, bazookas and stuff and all that kind of nonsense. There's no inherent pride around being gleeful about where you were born. We are all accidents of geography. I am an accident of geography by virtue of being born in Birmingham, which some could say is a curse, but by being English, you know, apparently the 7th richest country in the world. And that in itself is not something to be proud of. There are things that are great about Britain, but being British on its own is not something that is great. Being qualities such as, you know, tolerant, liberal, inclusive, nice, talking in silly voices to animals, those are the things that make Britain great. Wrapping yourself in a flag is not something that makes Britain great. And whilst occasionally I do say I don't try to talk about politics, obviously I've gone straight in at the deep end, and I probably should have warned you a couple of minutes ago, but I don't know what I'm going to be saying until I open my mouth and words come out, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I said that. Well, there you go. The refrain, the ending section of Irish Blood, English Heart, is where he sings, I've been dreaming of a time when the English are sick to death of Labour and Tories and spit upon the name Oliver Cromwell and denounce this raw line that will still salute him and will salute him forever. Well, that bit's aged particularly well, but there are obviously some caveats around that. To talk about national identity is and was unexpected at the point in 2004. The single did very well. It got to number 3 in the UK pop charts, and it was backed by some long overdue B-sides. So listening to it, you kind of go, well, where's Morrissey sticking the melody in this? Listen to Irish Blood, English Heart, and you go, oh, that section surely is a chorus. Not really. That section is actually where he's singing a bridge. The section where you think he might be singing a verse, no, he isn't even singing at all. That's one of his great melodic gifts, is to put melody and words in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to be, and somehow that makes the song even better than the real thing. It was released on a number of formats. By the way, I should point out I wasn't buying vinyl at this point for Morrissey. I just wasn't. I had to do things like, you know, rent and food, and that's one of the things, is that all this stuff that I buy, all the gigs that I go to, I want to spend my money on after I've paid for things like food and heating and cats and stuff like that. You know, it's my fun money. This isn't eating into my ability to do the things that really, really matter. And, you know, as I've said before, you know, earth without art is just air. Art is the thing that makes life worthwhile. And so, Irish Blood, English Heart. Sorry, I got distracted there. Oh, look, a shiny squirrel. Was backed with a track called It's Hard to Walk Tall When You're Small, which, by the way, was originally demoed in 1997 with a different set of music. And the music for the 1997 version, I think, was written by Morrissey's now former drummer, Spencer Cobrin, whereas I don't know who wrote It's Hard to Walk Tall When You're Small, the music for that. Obviously, in the days of multi-formatting, you had your second CD with an exactly identical cover apart from a slightly different purple sticker. Backed with two great B-sides, the Munich Air Disaster, 1958, and the Never Played Symphonies. And the Munich Air Disaster, by the way, takes its name from a catastrophic moment in Mancunian sporting history in Munich in 1958, where I think the Mancunian football team, I forget whether it's City or United, all perished in a plane crash during takeoff or before takeoff during a very, very snowy day. And that was in the days when the whole football team would fly on one plane, and the entire team near enough was wiped out in an hour. And suddenly Manchester had to start again. Imagine being, in the team in 1959, and the only reason you were there was because something went wrong in 1958 and a fire broke out and the whole team died in a plane. It gives you a degree of survivor's guilt, the type of thing that, for example, Jason Newsted might have in Metallica, the idea of going, I'm only here because somebody else is dead. And that's a strange way of thinking, but it's not one that you should let really define yourself. But the Munich Air Disaster, 1958, great song. A song about, and like a lot of Morrissey songs, nostalgic for a time that didn't really exist, at least not in his memory, because I think Morrissey was born about 1958 or so. So there will never have been a time in his life, like, for example, there will never been a time in his life when it wouldn't have happened, in the way that if you meet a 24-year-old person now, someone's having their 24th birthday, 9/11 will always have been part of their life. It will have happened forever. They will have never known a reality without it. And that, although to me, that doesn't feel that long ago, it is. It's a quarter of a century in the rearview mirror. And when this came out, 1958 was 46 years ago or something like that. So, yeah, it's a defining part of being from that part of the world. The third track, the Never Played Symphonies, is about really a regret of a life half-lived or a life unlived, where you were kind of just going, right, so, what could I have done? What could I have been? I could have been a lover, a father, a whatever, but you weren't because of the Never Played Symphonies. This was followed up after a number 3 chart position with what turned out to be probably Morrissey's most successful solo LP, You Are The Quarry. Sold 72,000 copies in the UK in week 1, was number 1 in midweek, but finished at number 2. So Morrissey never got his number 1 solo album, at least not at this point. And in Autobiography, it's because apparently the Keane solo album, which I think is called Hopes and Fears, had been out for 7 days. Morrissey's album had only been out for 6 days, and therefore lost 1 day of sales. Morrissey is obsessed with chart placings, and now that streaming and downloading exist, the idea of a chart placing really defining your worth to somebody is somewhat old-fashioned. The thing that's really matters is not what point did this get into the charts, it's how much is this loved? How much does it matter to somebody? How many times do you see the lyrics tattooed on somebody? How many tickets do you sell for shows? Because the number of copies that you physically sell is somewhat archaic in ye olde days. Well, in ye new days. In ye olde days, it mattered. So the only way you could judge chart placings was through sales. Now you can't. There's no metric. You can't really judge how successful is it. Are you judging the success of a piece of art by how many clicks it gets, how many streams it gets? I mean, by that metric, then surely Taylor Swift will be the most important person ever, and I'm sure that's not the case. Very important, very good at what she does, but maybe, not the most important artist on the planet. One of them, sure, but, I wouldn't really want to comment on that. So the album opens with America Is Not the World. which is pretty odd because, Morrissey's moved to America. He's now an immigrant, or as they like to call themselves, an expat, an immigrant, who has effectively chosen exile in America. And then looking at it, the lyric to it is America is not the world. And by the way, I will say that the lyrics on You Are the Quarry are not Morrissey's best lyrics. The fantastic. There is an element of what feels like first draftism in some of the lyrics. There's a lyric about "Hey you big fat pig," for example. In America is not the world. The bit where he sings and, oh God, see, this is the thing. Maybe there should be a lyrics committee where you have to justify lyrics, where he goes, "Hey you big fat pig, you fat pig, you fat pig, steely blue eyes with no love in them, scan the world." And it's like, America, the land of the free and of opportunity, in a just and truthful way, where the president is never black, female or gay. And you've got nothing to say to me to help me believe in America. It brought you the hamburger. Well, America, you know where you can shove your hamburger. And I'm like, where's the mystery? Where's the art? Where's the genius in that? There's not even, and I mean, I'm going to be bitchy here. If you're going to write a song called America is Not the World, surely a great angle to take would be about sports. Because remember, American football, the world's football thing, and you're kind of going, no, it's just Americans that play American football. So saying it's the American world football is kind of like saying, well, I'm the most handsome guy named Mark that was born in my hospital on the day I was born. I mean, that might be true, but you're starting to really limit your options here, and you're starting to overqualify things. So America is Not the World is not a great song. It does address his 7-year absence, his move to America, but it is an unsubtle lyric. It's not quite at the level of being smacked over the head with the obvious hammer like some of Roger Waters' lyrics or perhaps Oliver Stone films, but it is by no means a subtle, clever, articulate lyric. And I'm kind of thinking, really could have done with a second or third draft of that to make it more, not flowery, but more artful. Because I think the thing about art is it changes the way in which you see the world. Art is a frame. The view through the frame is always going to be the same. The world that you see through that frame is always going to be the same. But it's how you look at it, what angle you look at it, what frame you're looking at it. Art is a tool that allows us to see the world in ways we don't before. It's a really important thing. And yet somehow you've got a lyric about, where you can show for your hamburger. And I'm like, that's just not very good. It really isn't. Sorry, it just isn't a great lyric. Obviously, you've got Irish Blood, English Heart, which was number 3, which is then the second track, went to number 3 in the UK pop charts. That is technically a banger, the first of 4 top 10 singles in 2004 for the Morrissey. And by the way, this was the only album in 2004 that had 4 top 10 singles. But again, as I was saying earlier about chart positions, how much of that is somebody buying it on the week it comes out and then it disappearing? If you're at number 9 in the pop charts week 1 and you're number 74 week 2, you can tell this one hasn't got legs. It's not going to go too far. Right, 4th single released from the album and 3rd track on the album. It went to number 10. The immaculately titled I Have Forgiven Jesus, which was released on 2 CDs and again a 7-inch probably. This is backed with No One Can Hold a Candle to You, the Slum Mums and the Public Image. But I've Forgiven Jesus. There's an interesting lyric about, why did you put me in such self-deprecating bones and skin? Do you hate me? Do you hate me? Do you hate me? Etc. And kind of going, there's a degree of self-pity in that for saying, well, the concept of original sin therefore means that you're being, condemned just by the act of existing. And surely if original sin does not exist and all thoughts are therefore the product of God, then therefore we should blame God for the feelings for which we are damned. And then, there's promptly an infinite feedback loop of sin that sits inside that, absolving oneself of responsibility. Well, that's a heavy subject to write a number 10 pop song about. It's about the nature of religious education. You know, the faulty kind of mindset that you might have around religious education. You know, if you're taught that everywhere you've ever been and everything you've ever done is a sin, and you know that, then you kind of go, that sounds oddly familiar. Revisiting the themes from obviously the Pet Shop Boys, but also the lyric that's in here around, you know, forgive me any pain I may have brung to you. With God's help, I know I'll always be near to you. But Jesus hurt me when he deserted me. But I've forgiven Jesus for all the desire that he placed in me when there's nothing I can do about that desire. Now, that's the type of thing that, you know, when you were 17, you might think, oh, that's insightful. You know, presumably if your virginity is an unexploded bomb and you're walking around waiting desperately to explode around somebody. But it's not a very mature way of looking at things, is it? You know? So why did you stick me in such self-deprecating bones and skin? Do you hate me? Do you hate me? Do you hate me? And obviously there's a degree of a Catholic education around that, possibly tying in with a provisional title, Viva Hate, where in Australia it was known as Education in Reverse. But the idea of going to an all-Catholic school and religious education and indoctrination, changing your worldview. Track 4 is Come Back to Camden. And we're starting to move a little bit beyond, I think, some of the self-pitying lyrics into something a little better, which is about drinking tea the colour of the Thames, and going back to Camden, which is a place where, you know, you once used to be, but as Morrissey sang on other songs, you can never go home again because you've moved, you've emigrated. So coming back to Camden and going, I used to live here, as Madonna said, this used to be my playground, and seeing it with eyes. Now every time I go back to Birmingham, and I haven't lived in Birmingham for 25 years, 24 years, 11 months, and approximately 20 days, you kind of end up kind of going, it's not home anymore. Looks like home, feels like home. Every time I go back to Birmingham, something's changed, something's different, something's moved, or something doesn't exist anymore. And you end up kind of going, home is a place that you can't really go back to because it doesn't really exist. You have to build a home in the place that you are. And Come Back to Camden, it kind of talks about that. Now, part of it is about the alleged relationship that he had with Jake, which he detailed briefly in the UK edition of Autobiography. It's about history, it's about locations, it's about, you know, the ghosts that exist. So, for example, you think about a smell or a taste. I can smell a certain brand of spaghetti bolognese sauce that they don't make anymore, but I can smell it and suddenly I'm right back in my mum's kitchen. I can smell raw, undiluted industrial strength chocolate coming out of the chimneys of Bourneville's Cadbury's factory. I'm back home in my childhood home, just like that. So it's about how home is something that you can visit, but you can never stay at. Like the reverse of the Hotel California is you can leave, you can check out, but you can leave, but you can never check out because it's always there. Or is it you can leave but never check out? I'm not sure. Anyway, track 5 is I'm Not Sorry, which I think is probably the most similar lyric that Morrissey has to Je ne regrette rien, which is, you know, I who has no regrets, used in the end credits of the film Inception. It's unrepentant, it's defiant, it's melancholy, it's that kind of reinforcement of going, well, I can't be wrong about everything, you know, because of the Pope Fallacy, the Morrissey Fallacy. Morrissey, who has been so successful throughout so many parts of his career, can't be wrong because the success is the proof of his success. Surely the success is a proof of his genius. And that's something which, I mean, I kind of think about sometimes when I think about people like Elon Musk, is they're quite big-headed. They think that because of their success, they can't fail, they can't make bad decisions. You know, the decisions that they've made that clearly pay off and have brought them, you know, royalties that have brought them luxury, a theme which is revisited later on You Knew I Couldn't Last, is kind of also the element of going, well, of course, you know, I'm successful because I'm a genius, and I'm a genius because I'm successful, and I'm successful because I'm a genius. And again, it's like a snake eating its own tail. It's an interesting lyric. It's unrepentant, and it does have that huge kind of, emotional blind spot around it. Like when you go past a really big vehicle and it goes, no, angle de mort, as it says in French, the death angle where you can't be seen in the mirrors of the huge truck, that's like, the blind spot of people that are very, very successful, is that they think that they're successful because they're amazing and not that they're successful for a huge number of reasons, including luck, privilege, occasionally making the right decision, and being able to keep going. I'm always thinking about the comment that was made on Reddit about success and class, which is, if you're upper class, well, more correctly, if you're lower class, you work at the fun fair. If you're middle class, you work at the fun fair and you get one shot to throw a dart. And if you're upper class, you get to throw as many darts as you like until one hits, you're successful and suddenly you're a genius. Yeah, that's the success fallacy. And it's an interesting kind of way of thinking about things. And of course, because if, the Moz kind of point of view, similar to the Pope fallacy, is, well, I can't be wrong because I'm a genius, and I'm a genius, therefore I'm successful, and I'm successful because I'm a genius, and I'm a genius, and therefore I can't be wrong. And you kind of go, sounds a bit like the hope leads to anger. I say that's like the Yoda speech, doesn't it? Fear leads to suffering, suffering leads to pain, pain leads to hate, hate leads to, a bad sequel with Jar Jar Binks in it, for example, that type of thing. So, yeah, it's okay. Not great. Musically, it's quite bland. And I think there are some songs that are on this album. Some of the B-sides beat the pants out of some of the A-sides. I'm not going to pretend for a second that they don't. Or more correctly, some of the album tracks, definitely. Especially some of the covers and some of the B-sides. Track 6 is "The World Is Full of Crashing Balls," which Morrissey played live in 2002. And again, it's an unsubtle lyric. Could really benefit from an extra draft, which, considering he'd been singing it since 2002, is quite a surprise. But again, about, was it lockjawed pop stars, thicker than pig shit, uniformed bores, nothing to convey, to show, so scared to show intelligence it might smear their lovely career. This world, I'm afraid, is designed for crashing bores. I am not one. You don't understand. And it's like, that's, well, okay, so I'm mixing up the verse in my descriptions, but that's a harsh lyric. It's a kind of anti-pop stars, anti-Boyzone, anti-Westlife, anti-Simon Cowell lyric. We're saying the world is full of crashing balls. Well, anybody that's argued with anybody on Twitter will know the world is full of crashing balls. That doesn't need a song written about it. But again, you can write songs about, instead of writing a song about how, lockjawed pop stars are thicker than pig shit, which is, not the greatest lyric ever made. You kind of go, maybe you could write a lyric which is about art and genius and how art can change the world and change the way that you think about it, and then go, if you can do anything, why be nothing very interesting? Example, you can go anywhere, you can do anything with your art, you've got complete artistic freedom, why be so boring? I don't know. But it's not a great song. Lyrically, poor. Musically, really like it, by the way. And I think between, Boz Borer and Alan White, some of Morrissey's best musical backings are on this album, by the way. Track 7. How can anybody possibly know what I feel? So we're detecting a uniform trend here amongst the lyrics. How does anybody know? How can anybody possibly know how I feel? Like, she told me she loved me, which means she must be insane. I'm like, how old are you? 14? 46. I've had my face dragged in 15 miles of shit, and I do not like it. Well, who likes having their face rubbed in shit? I've had a dog. I know they don't. Even a dog doesn't. And then, of course, there's the lines about, as for you and your uniform, you smelly uniform. You think you can be rude to me because you wear a uniform, a smelly uniform. I'm like, really? This is not a great lyric at all. By the way, what is a great lyric? Track 8, second single, number 6 in the UK pop charts, first of the gang to die. Here is a stone dead, immutable, unstoppable Morrissey classic. And, you don't know love until you've seen sun rise over, whatever it is, or you see, reflected in the reservoir. What an amazing, amazing lyric First of the Gang to Die is. And of course, obviously lent itself to headlines when Andy Rourke died a couple of years ago, the first of the gang to die. And obviously with Manny dying last week, he was also the first of the gang to die for the Stone Roses. But then the first of the gang to die, the idea of, what's about the notion of the outsider, the glamour of crime. I just love the romance of crime from Sister, I'm a Poet, about love is insane, about wanting to belong, about finding a gang that takes you and accepts you and puts you in. And Hector, by the way, was apparently a gang leader in LA that was in some of the local news at the time. So it's about an actual murder of an actual gang leader that then was, regarded by some as a relatively local hero, standing up for the oppressed against the evil authorities, the people in the uniforms, the smelly uniforms that think they can be rude to you as they like. And of course, you've never been in love until you've seen the stars reflect in the reservoirs. And you've never been in love until you've seen the dawn rise behind the home for the blind. These are the lyrics which I hope to hear. Things which will change the way in which you've seen things, and going, the idea of just standing and seeing stars reflected in a reservoir, or seeing dawn from behind the home for the blind. Very mundane, very normal things, but things that you go, this is unusual, this is special, this is unique. And then, you've never been in love until you've seen sunlight thrown over smashed human bone. Well, never change. Or more correctly, maybe sometimes you should change, because otherwise you remain a perpetual adolescent. First of the Gang to Die is a stone-clad, solid classic. I love it to bits. It's one of my favourite Morrissey songs, because it gives you a perspective that you might have gone, I never thought of that. Wow, never thought of it. It's followed up by Let Me Kiss You, which, by the way, references the 1951 film A Place in the Sun. And Nancy Sinatra's version, she recorded a version of it, was recorded the same day as the single. The Nancy Sinatra version was released late 2004, the same day that Morrissey's version was released as a single. So for one of the very rare times in history, two artists released the same song on the same day. Morrissey's got to number 8, Nancy Sinatra's version got to number 74. But it's a good song, but it's, again, a little bit self-pitying, a little bit first draft in some of the lyrics. I've zigzagged all over America and I cannot find a safety haven. Good lyric, not amazing. Track 10 is All the Lazy Dykes, which apparently was inspired by a gay bar called, and let me just quickly, the Palms Bar, which was near Morrissey's home, where occasionally he would go and sit and drink and stuff. And but I mean, I don't know for sure if that's the case or not, but apparently that's what it was inspired by. The idea of just, and then track 11 is I Like You, recorded in 2002 and played live on that tour, rearranged in the studio, by the way. So rebuilt, rethought, remixed and remodeled, I guess. But then there's a lyric, it's so shameful of me, but I like you. No one I ever knew or spoken to resembles you. This is good and bad, depending on my general moods. And it's a good lyric, but it kind of reminds me of, if you're in a relationship with someone and you're scared of showing your feelings, I like you, And that was the word, was a little warning sign. As a great song with a wedding present had it, by the way, which I think is Don't Take Me Home Until I'm Very Drunk Indeed. And then the last track is I Couldn't Last on the album. It's a dissection of the music industry. It's apparently a phrase in the 1974 kind of death letter of Candy Darling, who was part of the Warhol group in New York. But Morrissey he puts this lyric about, that the northern leeches go on removing, and then in the end your royalties bring you luxuries, but oh, the squalor of the mind. And that was just reading that, and you kind of go, you get an insight into his mindset, which is that everyone around him, or at least a number of people around him, are leeches, they're parasites, they're feeding off his genius. And that's reinforced with a couple of sentences that are in the autobiography. And he regards himself as a genius beset by parasites that exist to just merely suck off him. And you kind of go, the northern leeches keep on removing. The idea of talking about, for example, Mike Joyce, or Stephen Street, or Andy Rourke, or, in his life is an endless succession of people saying goodbye. And basically people that kind of go, this relationship I have with you, Morrissey, isn't working. And you kind of go, and I've said this to other people, it's, if the key thing in all of your failed relationships is you have to ask yourself, what is it about me that causes those things to end? And depending on your point of view, you can be very big-headed about it and go, well, they're just awful, they're all parasites. You can kind of go, maybe there's something wrong with, or maybe, maybe my expectations aren't realistic in this situation as well. It's a bizarre kind of situation, but it's not a dignified way to end the album. It's to, even 7 years after the court case, 7 years after the album, where he said that a man with times on his hands will happily slit throats, and losers and liars and, judges are, terrible human beings. It's still this absolute lyrical fury, somehow having been abused by the legal system, because they don't believe that they're wrong. I can't be wrong because, well, I am who I am and I don't make mistakes. I'm a genius and therefore I'm successful, and I'm successful because I'm a genius. And of course, if that's the mindset that you have, when you stop being successful, instead of going, was it me in my own echo chamber lacking external impetus and external ideas and other points of view to keep grounded, or was it sabotaged by jealous underlings that want to see me dragged down and ruined? And it's more likely the former than the latter. It really, really is. So the second single released by the album, by the way, I should say, You Are The Quarry is a very good LP. It's definitely superior to some of the other ones that he's made. And You Are The Quarry, by the way, the cover art, in case you noticed, Morrissey had resurrected Attack Records, and there is a machine gun, a Tommy gun, which is shown on the cover of the album. But not every cover of the album, by the way, because Walmart wouldn't carry it. So there's a different version of the cover that was presented to people that bought it in Walmart. And there was a third version that I think was sold in Korea, because even that version was too controversial. As I said, second single from the album, First of the Gang to Die, released on a CD single. This one was backed with My Life is a Succession, or My Life is a Succession of People Saying Goodbye, which is a great song and a fabulous title, but it does kind of wonder, you're so close, but you've not quite made it, have you? And then on the DVD single, and my God, the DVD single is almost as bad a format as the cassette single, is Teenage Dad on His Estate and Mexico. So again, third-party view of other people, bit judgmental, lacking in subtlety sometimes, especially Teenage Dad on His Estate. But Mexico is a great song about, well, somewhere in the world is there a country just for me, a country just for the lonely, a shoreline for life's lost sailors, as the great Gene song Somewhere in the World had it. Mexico, again, like First of the Gang to Die, is about trying and finding somewhere to belong. If, of course, you didn't like DVD singles, in America, a 4-track EP of First of the Gang to Die was issued, featuring First of the Gang to Die, My Life is a Succession of People Saying Goodbye, Teenage Dad on His Estate, and Mexico, the latter two of which making their first CD appearance. The third single released from the album, and I have to be sure on this, got to number 8, Let Me Kiss You. Again, not vastly imaginative, these covers. You'd have thought that with 7 or 8 years of not releasing anything, Morrissey would have found plenty of interesting things to put on his covers, but he doesn't. This features a new track, Don't Make Fun of Daddy's Voice, which is a new Morrissey original, I believe, which was written by Moz and Alan White. Great song. Wish it had been on the album. Maybe it wasn't finished in time. And it kind of, makes I think it was originally recorded by, was it Johnny Panic and the Bible of Dreams under the title Paranoia. It's a ridiculous song about the Heimlich manoeuvre and how that affected his voice in future. So don't make fun of Daddy's voice, because when he was young, something got stuck in his throat. Great song. love it. Played live many, many times. And then 2 more B-sides, Friday Morning and I Am Two People. Friday Morning is a kind of like an epic, a farewell to a loved one, whereas I Am Two People is really about, the birth side. So, for example, when people go introvert but an extrovert, Sagittarius but also this, loud but also shy, those type of things. I think about, when Robbie Williams was talking about his ego jacket, the idea of going, when he goes on stage, he's not Robbie Williams, he's playing the role of a pop star called Robbie Williams, who's really, really good at the job. And that version of him is impenetrable, invulnerable, sarcastic, witty, but the real version of him isn't any of those things at all. It's like an exaggerated character of himself. I think, I remember thinking this when I was watching Morrissey in 2009 at Brixton Academy. He was just standing at the lip of the stage, but the way the light was projecting, it projected this huge kind of 40-foot shadow of Morrissey at 8-foot quiff. And you kind of go, that's a public image of him. There's another person that exists inside him, but nobody gets to see that, because he's built this layer of protective armour around him, a public persona, which is who he is. And that's interesting. So there's 2 people. Then NME, amongst many other things, released a cover-mounted CD called Songs to Save Your Life, which is a compilation of Morrissey picks plus extra songs, 4 extra songs which they'd put on. So a number of old classics such as Ludus, Let Me Go Where My Pictures Go, Sack, Colorado Springs. I think Sack supported Morrissey in 1999. But also new bands like The Ordinary Boys, Franz Ferdinand, The Killers, and The Libertines doing Time for Heroes. Worth picking up on Discogs, a couple of quid. Kind of like an All Back to Mine for Morrissey, but free on the cover of an NME. You Are The Quarry was also released in the run-up to Christmas in a 2 CD edition, this featuring the B-sides, the bonus disc B-side collection, which takes all the B-sides from the first 3 singles, 3 B-sides from each single, turn them into a 9-track EP, but was also followed up very promptly by I Have Forgiven Jesus, the 4th and final single from the album, that is backed with No One Can Hold a Candle to You, which is a cover of, I think, James Maker and the band Raymond. Great song, by the way. Played live many times, always went down extremely well. And then the Slum Mums, which is kind of like the inverse of Teenage Dad on His Estates, a sequel to Pregnant for the last time as well. And then the Public Image, about Morrissey and the difference between who he is and who we think he is, about 5% person to 95% pop star, a theme which perhaps builds upon what was originally in I Am Two People as well. I saw Moz twice during this period, and once I saw him at Meltdown at the Royal Festival Hall on the 26th of June 2004. Alan White had left the touring band because of apparently a back injury, and had been replaced by Barry Cadigan, who now is a member of and that lineup, the one with Alan White, was captured on Who Put the M in Morrissey, recorded live on the 22nd of May 2004, Morrissey's first Manchester live appearance in 12 years, the last filmed and recorded, well, the most prominent of the last shows with Alan, as Alan left the band. Great show on his birthday, I think his 46th or 47th birthday, or as he described it, you've made a happy man very old. Alan left, and I don't quite know why. In Autobiography, page 378, Morrissey says it could so easily have happened to any co-writer from East Finchley that they'd been chosen to write 87 songs with Morrissey, which I think is 13 more than Morrissey wrote with Johnny Marr. And if it could so easily have happened to any co-writer from East Finchley, why did it happen to him? Why did it happen to Alan? And I think, to be honest, it's because Alan was a great co-writer, a great foil, very good at writing music, very good at writing melodies. He was a perfect man for the time, and it could so very easily have happened to any co-writer from East Finchley, but it didn't. In the same way that anybody could write a Ramones song, but only the Ramones ever wrote a Ramones song, because even though they appeared simple and easy, they couldn't be that easy. And also, by the way, that ties in with my comments earlier around the genius fallacy is that Morrissey believed that no matter what he did, no matter who was his co-writer, he would have come up trumps with amazing works of deathless genius, to quote Select Magazine from 1991. And anybody who's heard found will be able to tell you that it takes two to write a great song, not one. And whilst it couldn't so easily have happened to anyone from East Finchley, because everybody has got to come from somewhere. And if you start criticising people from where they come from, you start to get into the realms of sounding suspiciously like exclusionary and having something about people that are immigrants or emigrants or whatever they are. The idea of once you reduce people to where they come from, you then stop them from being who they are and tell them you need to stay in your box, you need to stay in your lane, don't get ideas above your station, don't step outside of where you come from. Don't forget, you're here forever. The second time I saw him was at Earls Court, the penultimate show of the 2004 tour, which, as the sleeve notes want you to know, was recorded in front of 17,183 people, as if somehow that matters. Live at Earls Court was not just recorded at Earls Court. Extra songs were recorded in Birmingham and Dublin and some other locations, so much so that they had already announced the release of the album and the single Redondo Beach before the show had actually taken place. Redondo Beach, by the way, being a cover of Patti Smith. And so, yeah, I've been present at the recording of a Morrissey single, Redondo Beach, live at Earls Court, available on CD there, backed with Noise is the Best Revenge, and on here, backed with It's Hard to Walk Tall When You're Small, a radio session version of the track. BBC radio sessions also include I'm Playing Hard to Get, which was a song about cruising but failing to be successful, which of course George Michael turned into the far more interesting Outside, the video to Outside of which is probably the most subversive work of art since Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator. Live at Earls Court is not great. The cover art does look a little bit like, will this do? The gatefold sleeve just has Morrissey. I mean, surely playing to his ego, you would have put like a massive picture of all the people at Earls Court going, look at how many tickets he can sell. No, not that at all. And instead you've got, the booklet and the CD in there and a little paper sleeve. And I'm just going to have a look and see. You see, surely something like that would have made a nicer photograph on the inside of the gatefold. Or for example, there's Morrissey with his band members all now wearing matching uniform outfits, which is in no way creepy or weird, as if somehow all the individuality of them has been squashed out and they become ambassadors or employees of the Morrissey brand. And the replacement guitarist was Jesse Tobias, whose dedication to the cause is undoubted, whose contribution in terms of writing and playing will become, I think, more apparent over time. But You Are The Quarry was Morrissey's kind of almost his second rebirth, his second great Indian summer after Viva Hate. The idea being that he was able to cast himself as somebody new and interesting, but of course, no matter where you go, you've never been to me. It's just part of who he is. He will always be Morrissey. And the way that I was at Brixton, when I saw him in that shadow, which was 40 foot high on the wall of Brixton Academy, I just thought, you're always going to be Morrissey, aren't you? No matter who you are, no matter where you go, you're always going to be yourself. You can't get away from who you are. That's a good and a bad thing, depending on who you are. But no, You Are The Quarry. Okay, so I've been a bit harsh on a couple of the lyrics. I think that's deserved. I think some of the B-sides are much, much better than some of the tracks on the album. Munich Air Disaster, for example. Never Played Symphonies, Don't Make Fun of Daddy's Voice, No One Can Hold a Candle to You, even though it's a cover version. All far better placed on the albums than some of the tracks that are on the album. But at the same point, as Morrissey said, I rain as many releases onto the world as I possibly can. Hence the live DVD, the live album, the upcoming greatest hits, the reissues, the singles. After 7 years in a drought, Morrissey came back out of the gates. And it was at this point that he kind of reset himself after 20 years in the public eye as an artist with longevity, not someone that would end up playing third on the bill at one of those Wembley Arena shows, which is hits of the 80s featuring Blancmange and Human League. This was a completely different way of thinking. And of course, you can sum it down into a few words. It's Morrissey's world. We just live in it, which was a phrase which he said, which probably reflects his worldview better than we would perhaps like to think. But nonetheless, You Are The Quarry was a fine album, and it was the start of where I started to question my relationship to him, because the direction he was going in and the direction I was going in were two very different places. But that doesn't matter where you're from. It matters where you're at and where he was going next. And where he's going next, whenever I get around to the next episode, probably in about 5 months' time, will be being the ringleader of the Tormentors, because he's never anything but a happy chap. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. So, stay beautiful, beautiful ones. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you soon. In the meantime, have a good time all the time, as someone from Spinal Tap said. And don't forget to put bitchy comments underneath if I've ever made any factual errors in anything I've ever done, because this isn't just a man talking about his record collection. These are to be rigorously scrutinised as if they were legal submissions in court and torn to pieces. Actually, don't do that. You've probably got cats, dogs and crisps. So don't forget, stroke the dogs, tell the cats they're pretty and eat the crisps. Don't do it any other way. And in the meantime, I will take care of yourselves and I will see you soon. Okay, thank you and good night.